There's always that exit strategy. But what are we chasing? We're chasing that rush, right?
Chasing the
like
rush.
I always tell people, man, every time I talk about the rush, I feel like I got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Every time. Like I don't care what interview we're doing. Like I still think about that rush.
Yeah.
Ain't gotta pay for it, but she gon' give it up.
So you had to go meet Jefe. You went down. Jefe flew from
Wherever he flew from.
Yeah. And then he
private.
Yeah. That a lot of those guys do that. A lot of the bosses in mainland Mexico that operate on the Baja Strip in Tijuana, Rosarito, they got private airports.
They fly right there by Tecate. There's a private airport, Tecate, Tijuana, right over there. They land it, and I get picked up by a Sicario.
Right.
In front of McDonald's. I don't know if you remember, you cross the bridge and there's that McDonald's right there.
Yeah, you just walked across the border.
I walked across the border. This was
up.
before when you could cross the bridge. Before they took that down. And there was that McDonald's there. I don't know if it's still there. It's been so long. So I just waited. I said, I'm here. He says, just wait. And sure enough, boom. It was a bulletproof Escalade.
Yeah.
Black. Roll down the window, get in the car. I'm like, okay, this is it, right? This is where they do the hit and no one's ever going to know.
So you're prepared to die?
I was prepared at that point. I was in my car. I parked at the Jack in the Box to cross over. And I was like, what do I do? Like, I can only take so many Xanax, right? You like, okay, I'll take this Xanax. By the time I get across the border, I'm going to have a margarita if I'm still alive. And at least I'll die in peace, right? So that was my mind. And I tell it in the book, like, what if I just turn around and just drive away? And I'm thinking to myself, you fucking idiot, Hanson, you got yourself into it. Cross that border and be a man, right?
Yeah.
That's what I did, Johnny. Because at the end of the day, I was the one responsible for it.
Wow. Yeah. So you went and you drove down to that little town, that little beach town.
Got picked up. And I remember we had this entourage. Man, it was the coolest thing. I haven't had an entourage like that since the USC football days.
That's wild.
We had, it felt like officers, but these weren't officers. These were Sicarios. And I remember they were on the walkie-talkie and they radioed Puerto Nuevo Numero Uno, which is like the number one, right when you get in. It's right on the corner.
Yeah.
And he had the place shut down. It was a Monday. The whole town was deserted.
Yeah.
He had his Sicarios. I finally introduced himself and I was so nervous.
Yeah.
I showed him my ID, like, hey, this is me. This is what we do, right? Like, hey, I'm not running here. Here's my address. Like, I wanted to be honorable. Like, just so he knows. But he already knew who I was. Come on, he had all that information. We sat down and I had to tell him, Johnny. And I'm not going to lie. I thought for sure he's going to be like, this guy's a bullshitter. But
well, for a second though, I mean, from the outside looking in, I know it was terrifying at the time, but of the $1.5 or $2 million of his money that got lost through this degenerate gambler who was trying to launder it, how much of it was profit? Most of it.
True.
Do you know what I mean? How much was he really out? 50 grand?
At the end of the day, yeah.
Like it's nothing. It's especially back then, it's literally like $1.
Yeah, for a guy like that.
He had dozens of guys like you all over the world doing $1 million deals every day.
Every day. And you got to look at it. I was a lot more valuable to him than being dead, right? Like,
100%.
look at what I was able to do for him.
Right. How much money had you returned him already up to that point?
Exactly.
Millions and millions of dollars.
I dropped off probably 10 million. No, about 5 million.
Right.
As of before even getting involved in this drug game.
Right.
I'm just talking, helping him pick up clean money, and he's sending me wires from Mexico to Costa Rica to pay my offices. You know what I mean? So it's just like all this money that I
he already made millions in Australia. He was already up.
He was already there.
But, I get it. These guys.
But you can't look at it like that, right?
They don't look at it like that.
But I don't think you and I could too, because if you and I go in an agreement and I tell you I'm going to sell you that book and I'm going to sell it for this price, I expect you to pay me that price, right? Because that's how I look at it. I'm not going to say I got that book for 15, but I sold it for 30, but you're only out $15. You can't look at it like that, because we went into a business agreement. Yeah. Kind of like the same agreement we went into with this Robin Hood, the money launderer. Like he can't look at it like, oh, look at all this money you're making off of gambling, because that's what he thought it was, right? Like, that's not how you look at it.
Well, he clearly looked at it like
it was
he
business.
could afford to lose it
for sure,
and you were going to make it back, and he needed guys like you.
Yeah,
because
I was a soldier.
Was he mad? Like, how did he give out his energy?
No, the energy was actually, it was like calm. That's what kind of scared me.
Right.
And he told me, he's like, you're not working anymore for 2 years. You're taking off. He goes, that guy's going to cause problems. He says, lay low. And he was so calm about it. Like, I'm thinking, fuck, I got to get this money back from him. I'm panicking, right? And he's so calm about it. And that's what scared me, because that shows how powerful this guy is. He's not worried about, this is peanuts to him.
So explain how he fit into the larger organization. This is fascinating.
So, these lieutenants, they have their own piece of the cartel, and they're just moving this product that they're getting at a great rate. And they have probably 10 guys like me.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it's just a money making machine.
And they're middlemen. Like, your function was as a guy, a middleman between the buyer in the source country.
Correct.
And himself.
That's right. He's got guys like that everywhere. Wow. And he's at arm's distance with all these people.
Were there any other gringos moving product for him that you were aware of?
Dude, I was the only one for sure.
Where else was he?
And you got to remember, I'm speaking Spanish a lot to these people, because, I was dating a Mexican. So she was like always talking Spanish to me. So I had to talk. Don't get me wrong. I got enough through to them that they respected that,
Where else was he getting product to besides America and Australia?
Toronto, Vancouver.
Right. How much were keys going for up there?
We were starting towards the end. We had tanks set up a operation in New York, like New York, Philly, and New Jersey. That's where the money was, you know. Like, once you go towards that East Coast, you're like 50,000 a kilo. He's making like in Toronto, and tanks making like 45, 50 in New York and Philly at the time. You got to remember, this is before when the market used to be good.
What do you think the freight cost on that? Like, if he's buying a ton of Coke from Colombia for $2,000 a piece, right? And so he's got it for $2,000 in Mexico. What do you think it costs him to get
his
a brick
transportation
to Toronto? Yeah,
his transportation. This is how it goes. So he's paying about $1,500 to get to Mexico. And then to cross the border from where, let's just say Mexico City, to make it easy. He goes to Mexico City, for instance, he would probably pay another $1,500 to get it to Tijuana, and then another $1,000 to hop it. The reason I know that is because I started to get involved in that game when I had to start paying them back.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, if I could save, $1,000, $1,500 on each kilo, because he's giving it to me in the U.S., eventually you'll find out I have to go work for him, and I have to sell his product and get it to where I need to go. I'm thinking to myself, what if I could help him with the logistics, bringing it from Mexico to the U.S.? And that's how I got into the business of helping.
Right.
I started to think to myself, what if I had a sailboat, right? I said, I'm right there in Newport Beach area all the time. I'm golfing at Pelican Hill. I said, I know what it is. I got a client that owes me like 120, and I know he owns a shipyard. I'm like, I'm going to just ask him if he wants to wipe his debt and give me one of his boats. And that's what I did, Johnny. You know what I did? I said, I told this client of mine, I said, hey, you got all these boats, man. I said, why don't we just write off that gambling tab of 120? And I said, give me that catamaran, right? And this is my mind's just thinking, right? I got to get this money paid back. And I'm fabricating this boat now, and I'm figuring out a way to have a stash spot in there so I can start saving $1,500 to cross that border, because I know El Jefe will pay that because he's already paying it. Right. So I'm like, okay, if I could do 1,500, let's just say I can fit 100 birds. That's 150,000, right? So if I could save 150,000, that could just go towards my tab. Right. So while I'm doing this, I'm getting this boat fabricated. I got a captain that's willing to do it. He doesn't know anything about the drugs. I said, hey, I want to get this boat going. I think I got something with illegals where we could bring them across and I can pay you. You're like a coyote. So I'm not telling them about the drugs, because you don't want to tell them about the drugs. No. They get scared and then they're panicking. So I'm telling him this. He's like, dude, I would love that. This is another gambling client of mine, and he's already in the hole with me like 10 grand. So his name's Paulie. He never got indicted because I think he went in on me, but that's another story. But Paulie was always gambling. I'd give him markers up to 10,000. He'd lose and he wouldn't be able to pay me. So I'm like, cool, I got $10,000 worth of work, Yeah. So I said, hey, I'm going to send you to pilot school. I want you to learn how to fly a plane. And I sent him to a school in Corona, and he started to learn to fly a plane. I was just going to get like a Cessna, a smaller plane. And I just wanted him to get comfortable on that. And I started to send him to pilot school. He started flying it.
What did that have to do with getting work over on a boat, though? A catamaran?
Well, listen, I was building the boat in Mexico, and I told El Jefe I need a spot to make this stash spot. I said, but I need 2 stash spots. He goes, why 2? I said, because I need one to put the product in, and I said the second one I want to put illegal in there, just so my guy thinks he's only transporting illegals.
Oh.
So that's what I did. I got this boat. I waited. In that 2 years I waited, I finally had that boat ready. And my guy, Paulie, he says, oh, dude, I can sail any boat. Don't worry. I've been sailing boats my whole life. He wasn't very good at the plane flight. He was very flaky. He's like, man, you're going to have to buy a plane, this and that. I'm like, man, let's stick to the boat then. I said, do you think you can go from Ensenada to Newport? He goes, yeah, that's easy. 24 hours easily. I said, do you need someone on the boat? He's like, no, I can do it by myself. I'm like, perfect. So I remember I went down there with this girl I was dating, and we actually went to Ensenada. And that's where the boat was parked.
Yeah.
And I told Paulie, I said, hey, Paulie, we're going to do a test run. I got 1 illegal. Little did he know there's 80 birds underneath the fucking
80 bricks,
80 bricks
in the fucking boat.
In the boat.
Wow.
And I didn't tell Paulie. I was like, man, this is like, I'm going to hell for sure for this.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you don't want to tell him, because then if you do get pulled over by the Coast Guard, you're going to be shitting bricks. Like if you got 1 illegal, okay, what are you going to get? A slap on the wrist? Okay, 12 months in prison. You know, Paulie, you'll be taken care of. We're wiping off your $10,000 debt.
So did you actually put an illegal on there?
I put an illegal in there. I put him in the stash spot. The second
was he
stash.
like, where the fuck's everybody else?
We just said we're going to do a test run.
I see.
And we told him. So he got in the stash spot. And Paulie takes it, and he goes to San Diego to check in, and they come on the boat, and they have to come on the boat.
Yeah.
And so they're in there, and he's in this compartment that's underneath, like there's a kitchenette in the boat.
Yeah.
And there was this compartment like where the table is, where you can eat. Wow. And he's in this compartment underneath.
That you can lift up.
That you lift up.
Wow.
It was badass.
Wow. Yeah, that's professional.
It was really professional.
And the kilos are hidden
underneath the fucking, so you'd have to pull this thing out of the water.
The entire hole.
Yes.
I see. Wow.
And I couldn't tell Paulie, obviously, right? So so he gets the illegal across, and I say, okay, now I said, you need to park it in Newport where it's docked at. And I said, I'll pay you the $10,000 that I'll wipe your tab off, and I'm going to give you an additional $5,000, for doing such a good job. So he's like, in his eyes, he made $15,000, right?
Yeah.
I said, good job. Now give me the keys to the boat.
Yeah, seriously. I'm going to need this boat. I'm going to need you to take a hike for a couple hours.
So he didn't think anything of it. And 2 days later, I sent the crew.
If you really want to live like us, I'm the best you ever had when you picture us. She don't let it ring more than once when you mention us. Cartier rings posted all up on the page.